Conditions such as poverty, conditions mass incarceration, conditions miseducation, conditions gentrification, conditions a lack of access to wealth. The president of Tanzania said, how dare you tell the oldest people on earth how to reorganize their family structure. Come on. Transferring children of the group to another group. It's genocide. We know right now the whole LGBTQ movement is a population control movement. That's right. Yeah. See, I can work with a Negro, but I can't work with a coon. What's the difference?
Please tell it.
I can work with white man's black man, Barack Obama, is coming to Africa to tell us that we got to let men marry men and women marry women. Mugabe said, when is he going to get married to a man, for crying out loud? On that list, and that is agents. If you're here representing Homeland Security, FBI, CIA, okay, or any other anti-African movement, don't sign. And number two, any aliens. That means non-African folks. As a Garveyite, as a revolutionary Pan-African nationalist, my work, my message, my agenda is only for African people. And I say that unapologetically. I am not in love with everybody. I want to be clear about that. I am not trying to solve everybody's problem. I am only interested in the problems of African people. By the Germans and the Amish, because we don't know what they're putting in those farms, but in that food. But he mentioned Black Star Line. He mentioned we don't own a shipping company. And 100 years ago, when the most honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, greatest black Pan-Africanist of ever, and of all time, and greatest black organizer in modern history, when he put the Black Star Line steamships out in the water, people laughed at Mr. Garvey, and they didn't understand what he was doing. But I was doing some research earlier today to find out exactly what are the services that China is offering to Africa so much that has us becoming increasingly dependent on Chinese aid and so-called investment, which is the new word for exploitation, by the way. Investment is the new word for exploitation and neocolonialism. They don't call it neocolonialism and exploitation anymore. They call it investment. So they make it look good while they're robbing you today. But what I found is the number one service that the Chinese is providing to continental Africa is transportation. That's the number one service. Not just building of the railroads, but also transporting the food, transporting the raw materials, transporting all of those products that the world so desperately needs from Africa. So if China is needed for transport, what if we own our own international shipping company? And Africa could be totally dependent upon African ships for what Africa needs. So although Garvey did that 100 years ago, here we are 100 years post-Garvey, and I'm dating that from the Garvey Convention, obviously 1920, okay? But post-Garvey, 100 years later, and we still don't have a shipping company. I just heard someone mention earlier that now Africa is making phones. We have certain African countries that are making phones. Well, that's good. But at the same time, it's not so good. Because we invented the cell phone. So if African people invented the cell phone, why are we just now getting to the point where we can produce our own cell phones? What is China's second main contribution, in quotations, that is offered to Africa? One is transportation. Number two is power. Electricity, water power, alternative sources of fuel. Well, guess what? Who went to Europe and taught the Europeans how to harness power in the form of electric? Go ahead. Who went to China and taught the Chinese how to harness power in the form of electric? It was a black man from America, Louis Slattery, who wrote the textbook to teach countries how to light up an entire city at night. The Chinese didn't know how to do it, so they brought Latimer to China. The British didn't know how to do it, so they brought Latimer to Britain. And even the Canadians didn't know how to do it, so they brought Latimer to Canada. In other words, I have a problem with us thinking that we're picking up something new when it's something old, but we don't know that we're the ones who gave it to the world. That's right. You see, I always say that before we can have any other kind of revolution, brothers and sisters. And I mean this. And yes, I speak with a psychological bias because I'm a psychologist. But I say this, before we can have any other type of revolution, we need a revolution of the mind. There must be a psychological revolution. Because without the psychological revolution, nothing else changes. We're talking about reparations. And I love the sister on the video from the Gambia where I was in November with Dr. Layla Africa for the vegan conference a year ago, where she said, our reparations is repatriation. She said repatriation is our reparations. Now when we speak of repatriation, especially from a Garvey standpoint, we never once, first of all, Mr. Garvey never led a back to Africa movement. The Honorable Marcus Garvey never led a back to Africa movement. There was no movement ever called back to Africa by any Pan-Africans. Not from Hippie Holly Garnett, not from Alexander Crummell, not from Edward Wilmot Blyden, not from John Brown Russworm, not from Paul Cuffey, not from Prince Hall, not from Garvey. There was no movement, not from Nkrumah, not from Lumumba, not from Sankara, not from Cabral, not from Sobukwe. No Pan-African has ever led a movement called Back to Africa. Repatriation is a strategic and scientific repatriation. It is not a wholesale pack up every Negro in the diaspora and bring them back home. Could you imagine what type of problems we would have if you took every Negro in America and brought him back to Africa as is?
Yeah, it'd be a mess.
Could you imagine the problems you would have with the football, and basketball, and black boys who don't want to do nothing but become rappers, some of them? Or black women with the weave and perm, no attack on no sister here. Or the black men with their white wife. Is that what we want coming back to Africa? Not to mention the LGBTQTIZX. Is that what we want coming back to Africa? So it must be a strategic and selective Pan-African repatriation.
That is true.
Not everyone. Mr. Garvey said only those of you who have something of importance to contribute should go back home.
That's right.
I had a Negro text me last week. He said, Dr. Umar, I want to go back to Africa, but where can I get a job? I said, you need to stay here, my brother. You need to stay here. Because that is not the mindset we go to Africa with. We go to Africa to offer opportunities, not to steal them. We must be the solution. You can't go looking for one.
Okay.
So it needs it must be an enterprising personality. It must be a pioneering personality. It must be a trailblazing personality. And it must be a grassroots, non-bougie personality. It must be a personality that can sleep in a sleeping bag if you got to sleep in a sleeping bag. It must be a personality where if you can't take a shower for a week, you just don't take one. And I mean that. And I mean that. We have to go fishing. For those of you who are Christians, you know the metaphor of Jesus going out to fish for followers. We have to go out and fish for the right type of Africans with the right mindset, because it only takes 2 coons to show up in Africa and destroy the relationship between Africans and Americans and Africa for the next century.
Yeah.
1 coon is enough to destroy the whole movement.
Okay.
And that's why I'm always looking for 2 things: people I can use and people I don't want to use.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to delineate between the both. You can go to Liberia, look at Liberia's history, and look at when we went back to Liberia during slavery under the auspices of the American Colonization Society. We went back with a European mindset. And a war was fought between indigenous Liberians and American Africans coming home, because although we were happy to be free from the white man, because we had been indoctrinated by the same white man we couldn't wait to get away from, we reinvented ourselves as that white man against our own. It happened in Sierra Leone. It happened. So you don't want to take every Negro back. And as we push the repatriation movement, you better best believe right now, right here in D.C., Homeland Security, CIA, FBI, they're automatically grooming coons, paid agents to infiltrate any repatriation movement.
I believe, yep.
You know they own it already.
Yeah.
They got a whole crew going through training right now on how they're going to infiltrate the repatriation movement and destroy it. We go back to the 60s, what did they do? They would write letters from Malcolm X to Mr. Muhammad, and letters from Mr. Muhammad to Malcolm X. They would write letters from Huey P. Newton to Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, then write letters from Kwame Ture back to Stokely fanning flames that were never even there. All the letters came from the FBI. They wrote letters from the Blackstone Rangers in Chicago, okay, to Fred Hampton. They wrote letters from Fred Hampton to the Blackstone Rangers, thinking they were about to go to war, and both letters came from the FBI and CIA.
Go ahead, that's right.
We got to pick and choose who we're going to struggle with.
Okay.
See, I can work with a Negro, but I can't work with a coon. What's the difference?
Please tell me.
I can work with a Negro, but I can't work with a coon.
Yep.
A Negro is an African whose ignorance is innocent.
Yep.
A Negro is an African whose ignorance is innocent. What does that mean? That means they may actually believe Jesus is white with blue eyes because it's all they know. They may actually believe Africa's nothing but AIDS, baboons, and malaria because it's all they ever know. A Negro's ignorance is innocent. A coon's ignorance is deliberate.
Sure is.
A coon knows better.
Yep.
A coon knows what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be. A coon knows what we should be focusing on and what we should not be. But with a coon, he has a personal agenda whereby he benefits more from standing with the oppressor than with the oppressed.
Come on.
Ooh.
I can work with a Negro because I can bring him into consciousness. He's ignorant.
Yep.
But the coon, there's nothing I can do for him because he knows what the Negro needs to know. But he's made up his mind to fight against it. Brothers and sisters,
Lord.
brothers and sisters, and I'm not going to keep you long at all because I know they got lunch waiting for us upstairs. I was looking, and this ain't the first time I looked at it, but I was looking today at the Geneva Convention, Crimes Against Humanity, Genocide definitions. Now listen to this. This is the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. Article 1 says, Article 2 says, in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or part. Let me repeat this. Any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. Letter A, killing members of the group. Letter B, causing serious bodily injury or mental harm to members of the group. Letter C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or part. I want to read that one again because that speaks to indirect racism. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions such as poverty, conditions mass incarceration, conditions miseducation, conditions gentrification, conditions a lack of access to wealth, deliberately calculated to bring about physical destruction. Letter D, imposing measures intended to prevent births. Listen.
All right now.
Planned Parenthood was founded to eliminate black life. Planned Parenthood has taken more than 3 million African lives since the 1970s. We know this. We know right now the whole LGBTQ movement is a population control movement.
That's right.
They not pushing same sex. They don't care if black women loving black women or black boys loving black boys. What they do know is if they can convince the kids to stay within the same gender, they ain't got to worry about no more fresh births. It's population control. And then it says, letter E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. It's genocide. Forcibly transferring children of one group to another group. So when Child Protective Services go into our homes and take our kids away because you refuse to give them ADHD medications and give them to a white gay couple to raise, because that's what they're doing.
That's right.
Black kids are more likely to end up with a same-sex couple of another race. That's called genocide. Why am I even reading that? And what does that have to do with Pan-Africanism? Everything. Because in order for us to make the arguments we need to make, to give us the elbow room to build how we need to build, to reconnect with the mother continent, we have to stop identifying as American.
Okay.
Your power is not in your African Americanism. Your power is in your Africanism. See, when you say I'm an African American, you become a citizen thereof, and the only courts to which you can appeal for justice are the ones operated by this country. A citizen can't go to world court. A citizen must go to domestic court. Only members of a nation can go to world court. So the 50 million of us in America had better come up with a new terminology for how we want to refer to ourselves, but because calling ourselves African American is limiting our judicial options for reparations and international justice. See, when the police kill you, that's not an issue for the Geneva Convention. When the police kill you, that's not an issue for world court. That's not an issue for international criminal court. Why? Because you're an American citizen. Divorce yourself from that and free yourself up. But Negroes got this idea that there's something to be gained by staying in alignment with your Americanism. After 400 years, don't you see the history? We've been Anglo-Americans, Black Americans, Negro small n, Negro big N, Black small b, Black big B, because we got this idea that if we just call ourselves the right thing, we'll get free. We still fighting now in the Black conscious movement. What should we call ourselves? Because don't nobody want to be African no more. When I came up with the unapologetically African movement, I said when I came up with the unapologetically African movement, Negroes called it unapologetically Black. I never said unapologetically Black. I said unapologetically African, but you'd rather be a color than a person. You'd rather be an adjective than a noun. That self-hate is still within us to this very day. And that's why you got to have a psychological resurrection and reconstruction before you have anything else. Because without that psychological revolution, we'll be taking nothing but coons to Africa who will cause more coonism and more coon problems. You can be invited to Africa, but you can also be disinvited to Africa. For those who go back to meet with Africa, right now I'm working on a 3-nation repatriation community where I want to build the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy in 3 different African nations with a supporting community right around it. And for those who go back with me, you're going to have to go through re-Africanization classes. Black woman, no weaving perm, whatever, go with me. Okay. I think you're actually going to get freedom without having that freedom being anchored into a nation state from which or to which you owe your spiritual, anthropological, and ancestral origin.
That's true.
If there is no past for you in Africa, there damn sure ain't a future for you anywhere else. So as Africa goes, so goes we. When people look at you, you represent Africa. I don't care if you're African American, Jamaican, UK, it don't matter. When they look at us, they see Africans. They never see Americans. They don't see Black French. They don't see Black British. They see African. And the respect you get is a direct result of the power relationship that exists between Africa and the oppressor nations. And what is the nature of the relationship between Africa and France? What is the nature of the relationship between Africa and the UK? What is the nature of the relationship between Africa and Belgium? What is the nature of the relationship between Africa and any of the European nations? It is a debtor-slave relationship. And that is why our relationship with the white man in America is a debtor-slave relationship. It shouldn't be that way. And it can be changed overnight. Mr. Garvey said if we knew ourselves today, we have a new reality tomorrow. True. Africa not backwards by coincidence. This is deliberate engineering by white folks in Europe and coons on the continent. Okay. You need the collaboration of coons and crackers in order for this thing to work. True. The collaboration of coons and crackers. Right up the street, you got the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. Right here in D.C., the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. And it's ironic that some of us would dare call ourselves fans and supporters of Barack Hussein Obama. Because Barack Hussein Obama did more in his 8 years as president to empower the IMF and World Bank in Africa than probably almost any president before him for at least 4 terms. Why is Africa still in the conditions he's in? Because when Africa comes to the West looking for money, there's conditions on those loans. There's 3 main conditions on those loans. Necessarily a historically homogenous set of people. I get it. But for the sake of African independence, for the sake of liberty for us all, you have to put an end to petty tribal differences, because whenever we bicker, our enemy wins. We must have a goal that is greater than just being part of our ethnic groups. That's one of the reasons why politicians don't improve Africa. Because most of us vote in Africa for the politician who belongs to our ethnic group. You might know that the Zulu brother no good. The Swazi might be a better candidate. But I'm Zulu, so I'm going to vote for him even though he's a stone cold traitor. I might know that the Kikuyu brother is no good in Kenya. But I'm a Maasai. And because I'm a Maasai, I'm going to vote for the Maasai sellout because we belong to the same crew. And why? Because I can get a couple crumbs from the table. That's why we don't get nowhere. The white man has been manipulating ethnic differences and ethnic tensions in Africa since the first day he landed. In fact, that's how he even got to where he is now. Because he can play them against them. But I ask you a question. As important as ethnicity is, if I find a skeleton under the ground in Nigeria, can I look at anything on that skeleton that's going to tell me that this is an Igbo skeleton versus a Yoruba skeleton? If I find a skeleton in South Africa, is there anything in that skeleton that's going to differentiate a Zulu skeleton from a Xhosa skeleton? If I go to Senegal, is there anything in that skeleton that's going to tell me whether it's a Wolof or a Mandingo? Hell no, they African skeletons.
All right.
As Africa goes, so goes us. What's the third principle that we all say? This white man's black man, Barack Obama, is coming to Africa to tell us that we got to let men marry men and women marry women. Mugabe said, when is he going to get married to a man, for crying out loud? When Obama marries a man, then he can come and tell me to normalize it. Until then, leave me alone. The president of Tanzania said, how dare you tell the oldest people on earth how to reorganize their family structure? Why are they pushing that? Because it's population control. I just saw a video the other day where a former Homeland Security undercover CIA agent said that he was part of a task force to put the AIDS virus in immunizations that go to Africa. He admitted it on the news. Yes, they made AIDS, Fort Detrick, Maryland, to eliminate African people, and then they said the AIDS come from the Congo. And the reason they said AIDS come from the Congo because the Congo is the single richest piece of real estate on earth. So if we can convince the world that the only thing in Congo is monkeys and AIDS, nobody will go, so we can continue to rob it blind of every mineral it has, especially the coltan, which we need for them cell phones, laptops, airplanes, radios, and everything else electromagnetic. For those of you who saw the Black Panther movie, vibranium was a metaphor for coltan. It's the coltan that gave birth to the technological revolution. Ryan Coogler couldn't say it outright, so he transformed coltan into vibranium. So number one, you got to make your country gay, because we got to reduce the numbers. You heard the brother from ECOWAS today.